Hello and welcome to Shoot the Hostage with me, Dan, and my partner, Sarah. We're a movie podcast who talks about a different film each week based on a theme. We do swear and we do spoil the featured movie, so only ever listen if you've seen the film or you don't care too much about spoilers. If you're a regular listener, you can just skip forward until you hear the intro music because you've heard all of this before. But if you are new to the show and you do enjoy what you hear, there are a couple of things you can do to help support the show. Firstly, make sure that you're subscribed on your podcast player so you get notified when new shows drop on Mondays. You could rate us 5 stars on Spotify, which couldn't be easier. You just hit the star icon below the show's artwork. Or if you have a spare few minutes, we'd love it if you could submit a review wherever you listen. Make sure you come follow us at STH_pod on social media. We are active on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. And lastly, the biggest thing you can do to help is tell a friend about the show. So that's about it. That's enough preamble from me. Over to me and Sarah for this week's episode.
Okay, so we're back for season 10.
Season 10.
And as we've already talked about a little bit, you might have heard in the last show, we're switching to a slightly different format this time. Because it's our 10th season, we thought we'd do something a little bit different in a sort of celebration of film, as you were.
Yeah.
But not necessarily good films. We are covering 10 movies this season instead of the standard 8. We're taking it in turns. Dan's picked 5. I've picked 5 of varying degrees of quality.
Mostly mine are shit.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I would say mostly mine, certainly critically, are shit.
I would say at least half of yours are shit. So like 2.5 of yours are shit.
Okay. But we are starting very, very, very strong with what I would call my favourite movie of all time.
Wow.
So no pressure.
I guess we were always going to get to this at some point then.
I just can't believe in 12 years of podcasting, I've never covered this movie before.
What movie is it?
It's The Thing.
And why have you never covered it before? I guess it only came out in 2011. So.
Oh, how dare you. So now you've got that joke out of the way. We did actually watch the 2011 prequel as well, so we've got that to refer to.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was the second best thing to come out of 1982. First being myself.
Oh, right. I was going to say E.T.?
You don't even like E.T. I hope you like me more than E.T.
I do like you more than E.T.
But that's a low bar.
E.T.'s a sentimental bollocks.
I love it.
But I haven't seen it since I was like 5, so...
Oh, and you're definitely not more cynical now that you're 40.
If I didn't like it when I was 5, I'm unlikely to enjoy it now, I guess. But
yeah.
Yeah, this was a flop, wasn't it?
It was a big flop, yeah.
Was it a big flop, though?
Yeah. So it was made for quite a lot of money for a horror film at the time.
15 million.
15 million. And if you bear in mind that Carpenter's Halloween was only 4 years prior to this, and that cost 375,000.
Yeah, and grossed like 70 million.
Which I'm guessing is how this came to be.
Obviously, he was given a bit more money, I guess, to try and replicate some of that success that he had before. So he had the bigger budget. So 15 million, I think it was, and it grossed 20 million at the box office.
Yeah.
We might have discussed this maybe a little bit in our, I was going to say our big break episode. For some reason, I think about Jim Davidson.
Never think about Jim Davidson.
Things to think about than Jim Davidson.
Michael Barrymore? He's less misogynistic, I
Barrymore
suppose.
killed someone, and I still prefer him to Jim Davidson. Allegedly.
For legal reasons.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
No. I think we touched on this perhaps in our Big Trouble in Little China episode.
Yeah, because this is our third John Carpenter movie.
Third JC movie, yeah. But I think I thought that this was way more of a flop than it is, in that it was made for 15, it grossed 20. I thought it lost like loads of money for some reason. So it probably didn't make any money because it's like a 5 million profit, adding marketing and all of that stuff. It was definitely a disappointment.
Yeah, I know John Carpenter himself was very disappointed when the reviews started coming in. People hated it.
And there's that as well. I think the critical response to it at the time probably factored into the amount of a flop that I thought that it was. Like for some reason in my head, I was thinking, oh, it must have lost an absolute fortune, like other movies that we might speak about in this season. But don't get me wrong, it's not like a great amount of money, but for some reason I just thought it did way worse, and I think the critical response probably factored into my sort of my thought process in that.
I think maybe in comparison to the runaway success that was Halloween, for example, the expectation was definitely that it was going to do a lot better than it did.
I think Halloween remained his highest ever grossing movie.
That would not surprise me at all. No. And arguably his most simplistic?
Probably. It was so successful. I'm really surprised they only made that one movie. And they never thought to...
You'd think there'd be like a huge franchise, maybe even a reboot, but nothing. Tumbleweeds.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd think there would be like a Busta Rhymes in a modern version, or...
Perhaps even like a weird installment a little ways into the franchise that doesn't connect to any of the prior stuff. But no, nothing.
Yeah.
It's strange.
Yeah, that is weird.
Yeah. I don't know. The more I've read about this film, the more I sort of sympathised with John Carpenter, because he really believed in the thing and it was not met with the sort of response that he had hoped for. And I know he's a crotchety old... what's the word? He's a grumpy old git.
Yeah.
And the stuff that I've been reading, I've always thought of him as a grumpy old git every time I've seen interviews with him. But I kind of assumed that was like a thing that developed with age. But it doesn't seem to be the case. It seems like he was always a bit of a grumpy dude.
I don't know. Like I've seen him in lots of interviews and the commentaries he does with Kurt Russell.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Their relationship.
He can have a laugh.
Yeah, exactly. He seems like the sort of person that's like, I've got a job to do. I want to get it done. And if you stand in my way or you like there's any red tape, then fuck off. And that I respect that. Like as long as you're not being an absolute tool to people, unless they deserve it, like people in suits or whatever. But I don't know. Yeah, he seems like a miserable old git, but that's not always a bad thing necessarily.
Yeah, I guess so.
Just like sort of sick of the process. And
like, I guess maybe grumpy is the wrong word. Let's just say he's about as far from a people pleaser as you can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing that disappointed Carpenter the most is kind of, well, the first thing we have to say is that this is technically a remake of 1951's The Thing from Another World.
Which I think Carpenter saw as a kid and was kind of inspired by it. I think I heard him say that he saw like a 3D version, which I did not know existed in the 1950s. Does that just mean it was a stage play?
No, I believe it was a more naive version of 3D. Oh. So correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pulling this information from the recesses of my brain. But I seem to remember that in Halloween, Jamie Lee Curtis, Laurie Strode, is babysitting these two kids. And I think they're watching The Thing from Another World on TV.
Okay.
So he definitely has a love for the original and quite a history with it.
Yeah.
So when his version came out, the director of the original, Christian Nyby, was pretty critical of Carpenter's version, and he was so gutted about that.
Oh, that's funny because Carpenter's version apparently has more in common with the original.
Yeah. So I think there's stories called Who Goes There.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
I read that as well.
So the original is like more of a... Is it like a who's a communist in our group sort of subtext situation? I haven't read it. I can tell you.
So?
I did put it on YouTube the other day, but I listened to about 12 seconds of it and I got bored.
So you managed as many as 12 seconds?
I was really proud of myself.
Wow.
I'm basically going around telling everyone I read a book. But yeah, it's funny how I think he was like, I really like the 50s one. I don't want to remake that. Mm-hmm. Let's go back to the novella and try and adapt that so it's different but also faithful to the original and the paranoia and all of that stuff that is present in the 82 version.
So do you think it's fair to call it a remake in that case? Because it is called a remake. Like it's generally considered to be a remake as far as I'm aware. But I read the same thing, that it is much closer to the novella. So perhaps it should just be a reimagining.
I mean, what's the difference, really? It's To me, that means the same thing.
Disagree, but semantics, I guess.
Yeah, that's how I always end arguments. Just say, oh, it's a semantic thing, isn't it? And just go your separate ways.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. I guess that's the end of
this
the podcast.
This has been fun. Yeah, so a lot of the critical reception was really disappointing for him, which sucks because it's so good. Obviously, I've already said on this episode and multitudes of other episodes that we've done, this is my favourite movie of all time. I never, ever am going to get tired of watching this. And I arrived at it quite late.
How old were you when you saw it?
I must have been at least 20.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw this before you did.
You did. You did. How old were you when you first saw it then?
It was on television. I think it would have been like a late night Friday night situation. I want to say somewhere between the age of 8 and 14. Something somewhere around there. Probably younger than 14, I would say. Yeah.
And how did you respond to it then? Did you get much out of it?
I don't think I did. I think I thought it was quite boring.
So this was another The Shining scenario.
Yeah, I guess so. I've definitely like The Shining, I've come to appreciate it more the more I've seen it. I think when you and I watched it together for the first time 3 or 4 years ago, I think that was only the second time I'd ever watched it. So I sort of went into it going, I don't really like this movie, but everyone loves it and thinks it's a masterpiece. Like, I must be wrong. And I do appreciate it a lot more. But having said that, I still am not like, oh, I don't get that 5-star masterpiece thing. For me, it's just like a solid 4-star movie.
Okay, that's still a really good score.
It's a really good score, and I've been trying to reconcile this in my brain because I really want to get what everyone else gets from it. But for me, it's just, we'll get into the creature stuff and whatever, I'm sure. But for me, it's just like a really solidly made movie that I respect.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I would go back to it that very often if it weren't for you, to be honest.
Well, in fairness, I've only made you watch it twice.
No, you have.
So far.
You have. But I guess I just respect the craft of it, and it is a John Carpenter movie. It's probably, for me, maybe outside of his top 5 movies for me.
Wow. Okay.
But there's others that I absolutely love of his.
Well, you're wrong, because John Carpenter himself considers this his favourite of all the movies that he's made. Yeah.
Wow. You'd think it would be Ghosts of Mars, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Or The Ward, perhaps.
Yeah.
Even vampires.
Yeah, well.
No, he's clearly a man of taste. But it's funny you say that, because I know you're a huge fan of Prince of Darkness.
Yeah.
Which is obviously the Thing is considered the first in his like unofficial Apocalypse trilogy.
Yeah.
Prince of Darkness being the second, the third being In the Mouth of Madness, which is really hard to get hold of in the UK.
Yep.
I was only able to find it on VHS, which is crazy. Such a good movie.
Do we have it on VHS?
We do have it on VHS.
Maybe we should watch it then.
We should.
Yeah.
You do not need to convince me to watch a film about Sam Neill going haywire.
That's like your favourite genre of movies.
It might be my favourite, like Possession, Event Horizon.
Yeah.
Give me that crazy Sam Neill. I'm down for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it does have such a solid reputation these days, which really kind of belies the critical reception when it was released.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, is there a better example of a movie that was universally, I don't know if it was like a 50-50 situation. The people that hated it really hated it, but the people that liked it really liked it. But I get the impression that it was kind of rated as a bad movie back then. And what's the difference now? Like, why have people changed their view on it? Is it the legacy of John Carpenter and all of the movies that he made after, and just seeing his kind of path through filmmaking and everything that he made and going, actually, this is a really good movie. It's a John Carpenter movie. Like, it sort of gained a bit of a cult status, and it's just now one of those movies that's one in every 10th person. This is their favourite movie. It's nuts. Like, the turnaround, I don't think I could give you a better example of a more severe turnaround on going from like shat on completely when it came out to it now being a movie that just everybody loves.
It's funny. I think potentially a lot of what you've listed there is behind the turnaround, but also it's my understanding that the turnaround happened quite quickly.
Oh, okay.
It's not like one of these films that found its audience decades after the fact. I think because it came out at a time when VHS was kind of in its infancy, it definitely had a second life on home video, and people started to come round to it then when it was released on VHS. So it didn't take too long for people to change their minds.
Yeah.
But it's certainly, in the past kind of 2 decades, has been recognised as one of the greats, for sure. It's wild to me. It's so weird. Like this, putting this amongst some of the other films that we're covering this season, it's such a weird standout to me.
Yeah, I probably would agree with you. I'm desperate to say what some of my choices are, but it's a big secret that you can see for free on Patreon. Yeah, it's definitely an outlier in the lineup, isn't it? Like you've got this, which I've already said, for me, it's a really solid, like 4-star movie. For you, it's a masterpiece, and I'm assuming like maximum
5 stars. Yeah,
5 stars for you,
no question.
Compared to what we've got coming up later, where it's the complete opposite of that in some cases.
Yeah, we're covering a handful of my favourite movies this season, and I can't and won't make excuses for them the same way that I would for The Thing.
Yeah.
Like I am ride or die for this movie. Whereas the others, I'm just like, yeah, I get why people think it's shit.
I'm guessing as well with The Thing, like it's one of those, like you mentioned, it sort of came out at a time when VHS was in its infancy, so that definitely gave it some legs. People would have been buying it, watching it and rewatching it, and it sort of gaining more and more cult status and notoriety in that case. But also there was a game which came out, about 20 years ago, early 2000s, I want to say, which was officially like John Carpenter was behind it, and was it a sequel to the Thing of sorts?
Yes.
Did you play it?
I've never played it, weirdly.
That blows my mind.
I know. I was aware of it, but yeah, I've never played it. But I do know the storyline, or at least how it starts. And I know that John Carpenter has said, like, it's canon.
Right.
Which I don't really want to talk about just yet, because obviously it ties into the ending of this movie, so we'll get to that later.
Okay, maybe we'll pick that up then.
Yeah.
So you had the computer game, and then you also had a remake / prequel. I guess that's a spoiler for that movie, but everyone knows. When did that come out? 2011. So like 30 years after the original that flopped, and
which is nuts.
Didn't the remake or the original movie, like the prequel, whatever we call it, so confusing. Like, didn't that do badly at the box office as well?
The 2011 version?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the 2011 version is a bit of a funny one, because a lot of fans of the original, they kind of are of two minds about it. I don't think it's a very good film, especially when compared to the 1982 version. But do I get nothing out of it? No. I think it's fun in its own way. I think it does some really interesting things in tying the films together and explaining, maybe even over-explaining how certain things get to where they are. And some of it's a bit laboured. It was heavily criticised for its effects work, because obviously one of the bigger things that The Thing is known for is the incredible special effects work by Rob Bottin and a kind of uncredited Stan Winston.
Big Stan, he did the dog. He made the dog thing, didn't he?
He did, but he didn't want credit because he didn't want to take away from Rob Bottin's work. Who was like 23 at the time.
I know.
Sickening.
Imagine being that talented at 23.
I can't. I wasn't. I'm not that talented now. It's sickening. But yeah, I think that was one of the biggest complaints of the 2011 one, was that they seemingly went to great pains to kind of replicate the practical effects, and then went and CGI'd over the top of them. Yeah, and a lot of them looked really crummy.
I'll be honest, like, we watched it the other night, and I'd heard this. It was the first time I'd seen it the whole way through, because I believed it. I put it on when I was drunk once and watched about 7 minutes of it, and then woke up at the end. This
is a recurring thing for you, but you told everybody you'd watched the whole thing. You logged it.
Did I?
No.
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, so I was I mean, I'd obviously heard that it's not very popular. People tend not to like it very much. I didn't hate it. I thought it was okay.
It's okay, yeah.
I don't know if I would watch it again. Maybe I will in 20 years or whatever, but it was fine. I was expecting the effects to be bad, and I thought they were actually quite good.
Did you?
Yeah, I thought obviously you can tell some of it is CGI, but I'm thinking, well, that was 15 years ago now. It's an old movie, really, and I think there are movies that come out now that don't look as good as that does. And I get that they shouldn't have CGI'd over the top of the practical stuff. They absolutely shouldn't have done.
I think it just sort of breaks my heart a little bit for what could have been. And I'll be honest, I don't know who did the effects work on the 2011 version. But yeah, I don't know. I've seen some of the behind the scenes stuff that came out shortly after, and it looked fine. I don't know why they did it. And I'm not even opposed to CGI enhancement. I think when it's done subtly, when it's done well enough that you don't notice it, great, brilliant. Yeah. But it's just so unnecessary in that film. Yeah,
they probably just did a bit too much. So just, when you start doing some colouring in and you do some colouring in, you think, oh, I'll just do a bit more, and it looks good. You go, I'll just touch it up a little. Or like when you're shaving a beard, like you sort of shave it into your face a bit. You think, I'll just go a bit short, and you end up just cutting the whole fucking thing off.
I'll have to take your word for that.
Like that.
I guess the closest thing I have to liken it to is cutting my Barbie doll's hair when I was a kid.
Yeah.
They'd end up with an asymmetrical bob, and it would just keep getting shorter until they were bald.
Yeah, until it's ruined.
Yeah.
But in your mind, you're like, I'm making this better.
Yeah.
And then you look at it when it's done, you're like, oh, fucked it. That's a pretty good analogy. I
should have stopped half an hour ago.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
So this is our second Keith David movie.
Is it?
Any guesses?
No. Oh shit.
I'll give you a clue. In the other one, he was on a horse.
Oh, Nope.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Exactly. Yeah. He's not in it very much. In my defense.
I was looking at his filmography, and I just completely by accident saw Nope on there. I was like, oh yeah, we've done that.
This was his first feature film.
Was it?
It was. Yeah, his first feature film credit. And what a career he's had.
Yeah.
So well done, whoever was the casting director on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also our second Thomas G. Waits movie.
Oh, I've written Tom Waits, but you've gone for the full Thomas G. Waits.
Well, Tom Waits to me is a different guy.
Who's that guy then? Who's Tom Waits? What guy is that?
I can't tell if you're joking. Thomas G. Waits is a different guy to Tom Waits.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I must be thinking of the wrong Tom Waits then.
So Thomas G. Waits we've talked about before because he was in The Warriors.
Wasn't that Tom Waits?
No.
Was he a roller boy?
No, he was one of the Warriors, but he is the one who had a disagreement with Walter Hill,
right,
and got thrown onto a train track. Or his character was thrown onto a train track.
Yeah.
About halfway through the movie. They wrote him out because they butted heads.
Yeah, I do remember us talking about that, yeah.
And he plays Windows in this.
Right. Oh, he's Windows in this. So I have a hard time remembering the characters' names in this. I think it's, I'd say like maybe a minor criticism. I feel like there's a few too many characters maybe for what this is.
Okay.
I'm not, obviously
No.
you disagree with me.
I do disagree, but I listen. I'm hearing you. I'm taking it on board.
As someone that has a problem like recognizing and sort of distinguishing people via their face,
mm-hmm.
I had a bit of a problem outside of MacReady and Donald Moffat and Keith David, outside and Wilford Brimley. No, they're all really recognisable, aren't they? Actually?
Yeah, Richard Mazur, like they all look quite different.
Mr. Cocoon himself, and obviously, yeah, Kurt Russell. This is only our second Kurt Russell movie.
I think so.
Obviously, Big Trouble, isn't it? And then this. Both.
There'll be others.
We're going to get to Stargate at some point, aren't we?
Yeah, we talked about that recently.
Yeah.
Big Kurt Russell fan. In fact, I have a tattoo of him as MacReady on my leg. One of my favourite characters in cinema history.
Why is that then? Why is he one of your favourite characters, do you think?
Because he seems tired and sick of everyone's shit. And also I think it was just like peak Kurt Russell.
Do you reckon?
I like his character a lot in this, which is really interesting because they offered the role to basically every other male actor in Hollywood that was around that age. And everybody turned it down, or they had scheduling conflicts. And then John Carpenter kind of went, what about this guy? And the studio was just like, no, he's too young, he's too pretty. He is. However, they kind of had to scramble at the last minute, so he was cast out of desperation, which is so odd because he's iconic in this.
It's weird to me when we watch a Kurt Russell movie. Like, in my mind, I'm like, he must have been the very first choice to play this character because he's always so good. Like, in whatever he's in, he's clearly given it his best. I would say, especially in John Carpenter movies.
Yeah.
Like, for me, his best performance is hands down Big Trouble in Little China.
Oh, you can just tell he's having such a blast.
Yeah, but I think that's just because it's more of a sort of my flavour, like a silly, goofy action comedy.
Yeah.
But I can see what you would like about this particular performance, I guess. Is it because when he loses a game of chess, he destroys the computer by throwing his whiskey over it? Do you like that, or
I don't love that because it seems wasteful.
You are wasting some whiskey there, aren't you?
And also a computer.
And a computer, yeah, who was voiced by
Mrs. Carpenter herself, Adrienne Barbeau.
So the only woman in the cast?
Technically, yes. She was a disembodied AI voice.
Who was killed by a man.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Drowned by a man.
Yeah, I love Adrienne Barbeau. I think she's fantastic. But yeah, another uncredited person in the cast.
What I was saying about the characters earlier, I have a hard time distinguishing, and I did list off like 6 people who are really sort of, you can tell who they are a mile away. But I would say outside of those, I don't know who everyone else is. And I think the only reason I sort of remember Donald Moffat so much is because he has my favourite line in the movie. Is this
the couch thing?
Yeah.
It's also my favourite line.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I think he delivers it so well, I think.
Yeah, it's I know you gentlemen have been through a lot, but when you find the time, I'd rather not spend the rest of this winter tied to this fucking couch.
Yeah. It's so good.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It is excellent line delivery. Agreed. I think probably the most iconic line, though, is definitely when they see the Norris head skittering around like a spider, and I can't remember the character's name, but he just goes, "You've got to be fucking kidding me."
Yeah.
I think that was a lot of the cast's favourite line.
Right.
From what I've read. So let's go straight back to the beginning. I know we've meandered a little bit, but I want to start at the beginning again. The opening is a little bit unlike the bulk of John Carpenter's movies.
What is the opening? The dog chase, or is it the spaceship?
It's the spaceship.
That's the very first thing we see, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
And I believe this was a Universal production.
Yeah.
And it's one of the few that didn't feature the Universal logo because they were worried that it would confuse people when it kind of cuts to the UFO.
But why wouldn't they just incorporate that then?
That was a suggestion. Nobody knows.
That's dumb.
I know.
Like, they do that quite a lot now, don't they, with films?
Yeah. I suppose it's a lot easier to do than it was in 1982.
Yeah, I suppose there is that, yeah.
But yeah, they kind of forgo the standard John Carpenter font, which I have looked for and I can't find anywhere. It's definitely not like a free font that's in existence. But they mimicked the title card from The Thing from Another World, and it involved a fish tank filled with smoke and a garbage bag and setting that on fire, and just like the inventiveness, the imagination that went into kind of replicating that is so cool to me. It's a really,
I heard someone speaking about this, and it's a really like simple kind of workshop solution to something that's really effective and looks really good. And now people probably spend tens of thousands of pounds trying to replicate something like that
on a computer
and it not looking anywhere near as good. Whereas you and I could probably do this with some smoke and a fish tank and, like you say, a bin bag. Get a fucking bin bag. What are they, like 10p?
But also I think it shows from the word go, it kind of shows the reverence for that Carpenter has for the first movie.
Yeah.
Which is even more heartbreaking now that we know the director didn't like this. But yeah, so not only is that a little bit different, we hear the first few beats of the music, which I love.
Yeah, we do. And it's one of the few, if not the only, Carpenter movie that wasn't scored by him.
I don't know if it's the only. I believe it was the first that wasn't scored by him. But Ennio Morricone did try to replicate Carpenter's style, which is why it's so synthy.
That seems weird to me.
I know. Just do it yourself.
Yeah. Why? Is it because someone was like, "Oh, we can get Ennio," and John was like, "If we can get Ennio, we're gonna use Ennio." I guess
so. I mean, this is probably the first time he had 15 million to play with. So
yeah, because he's like a very much one of these guys that sort of do it yourself kind of person, and he loves his music. That's pretty much all he does now.
Yeah.
So you would think that he would want to do it. So which is what makes me think that he probably just had that opportunity and was like, well, we might as well use Morricone then.
But interestingly, Ennio Morricone got a Razzie nomination for this score.
I heard this.
Insane. Why?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. It's definitely not a bad score. I don't love it. Like, I prefer almost all of Carpenter's scores himself in his other movies, I think. But I think it's a little bit flat, I'll be honest.
Okay. I can see why you would say that, but I feel differently. But, I'm trying to be so respectful and diplomatic.
No, don't be.
Rather than just going, "You idiot!" No, it's brilliant.
Call me like it's fine. I don't care. Like, we can have a difference of opinion on this, and maybe that's kind of the difference between me like liking this film and you loving it. Like, it's one of those things that works for you more than it does for me. Like, I like it, but very rarely am I. If it comes on my Spotify playlist, very rarely am I listening to it. I'm usually skipping it to Big Trouble in Little China.
Not even Assault on Precinct 13.
Yeah, I'm listening to that. Of course I am.
That's such a banger.
Yeah. But yeah, Razzie, no, it's not a bad score. It's a decent score. It just doesn't fully work for me independently. But Razzie, that seems ridiculous.
It's so harsh.
I bet there was way worse scores out in 1982. It feels like one of those things that a few people like shat on it, and then people just sort of started piling on it because it was like popular, the popular thing to do.
Probably. But something that I find fascinating is that Morricone then used some unused music that he created for the thing in The Hateful Eight, which he got an Oscar for.
That's nuts, isn't it? And isn't that mad how, like, then he can get the Razzie for it, but then 30 years later, for pretty much the same work, it gets an Oscar. That just tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it? About how people view things at one time and they view them differently at another time, and how fucking stupid it is really to sit around and criticize things.
And how people's influences, how people's opinions are influenced by those around them. Like you've said, you know, it became fashionable to dogpile on the thing, so everybody did it.
Yeah.
But now it's held in much higher regard, so they're like, well, okay, but now it's Oscar worthy.
Yeah.
It's a bit strange. It just kind of makes me want to disregard all awards ceremonies, which I tend to do anyway, because it's all bullshit.
I think disregard all award ceremonies, disregard all opinions. I would go one further, just like, who cares what anyone else thinks? Just like, don't listen to anyone. If there's anyone that's sort of sitting around talking about movies and offering their opinions on it, don't listen to them. Like, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Except for us, we know what we're talking about.
Sometimes. Also, can I motion to get rid of the term guilty pleasure as an extension of that?
It's just something I like that other people tend to not like.
Yeah, I love the Step Up movies. They're shit, but I love them, and I don't feel guilty about them. It's fine.
I sort of, I mean, there are a few in this season that I would probably put under that umbrella of guilty pleasure, but
if you don't feel guilty about liking it, then it's a silly term. I don't like it. I don't care for it, Dan.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Like, you can recognise something as bad, and I do in this season's case.
Oh, we will, yeah.
We'll get to some of those, but I fully know and understand that they're bad, but that in a way is part of the charm. And I'm like, it's bad, but I still love it. It still does something for me. So yeah, it's weird, isn't it? That guilty pleasure is sort of tied into that mentality of following. It's like,
you should feel shame because this thing is bad and you enjoy it. No, I refuse.
Yeah, absolutely.
So something that's always puzzled me about the very start of this movie is the whole film spoiled for those that understand Norwegian.
I don't understand Norwegian, so I don't know. Why? What do they say?
Well, it's kind of a garbled version of Norwegian, but the loose translation is like it's the dog. It's not a dog. Basically, they're telling them like don't trust the dog.
I don't think that's a spoiler necessarily, because you're not gonna
I
don't trust
do.
a dog. You're not gonna go, oh, why? Because is it an alien?
The Thing, in a movie called The Thing.
I don't. It's not the first thing I would think of. I'll be honest with you. I just think like, oh, has it got rabies or something? Is this a Cujo situation?
I guess. I don't know.
But haven't you already seen a spaceship though at that point?
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe I'd put two and two together. They're chasing a dog. There was a spaceship earlier. Maybe they're linked somehow. I don't know. It's not like it's a mystery, is it? Like it has a mystery element in that there's a paranoia part of it where people don't know the motives of other characters
And who's been got.
Yeah, but it's not like it's pretty quick to get going with the whole. There's this fucking thing with tentacles and it's going to change into this thing and that thing. Like it's not like
For a movie that's
it's not a
this
Shutter
old.
Island situation where it's like the whole movie's like, oh, what's going on?
Yeah, for a movie that came out 40 years ago when things tended to be a little bit more slow burn, like late 70s, early 80s, this movie shuttles along. They don't hang about.
I'm sort of surprised the handful of times that I've seen it, but when I do watch it, is how quickly it gets to that stuff.
Yeah.
It's the first time you sort of see the alien do its thing in the dog
The
pen.
kennels, yeah. So the dog.
Is it Jed?
It's called Jed.
Was called Jed.
Oh, damn.
Sorry.
Stop.
4 years ago, man.
Oh, you always do this.
That dog is dead.
Every time we watch a movie and there's an animal in it, you're like, that animal's dead now. It's awful.
That dog's grandkids are dead now.
Stop. I think we should just take a moment to appreciate Jed. Can we have a moment of silence for Jed and the hard work that he did in this movie? Because I know people were talking about there should have been a category added to the Oscars after the dog performance in Anatomy of a Fall. There should have been a category added in 1982 for Jed, because that is some good dog acting. That was one of the first notes that I made.
Yeah.
What a good boy. The goodest boy. But it's kind of heartbreaking if you're an animal lover. It's not a fun scene to watch.
Or when his face splits open.
Yeah.
But it is fun to watch because it's like the effects are so good.
Is that the sort of, I think they called it like the flesh flower, and it's just sort of its head opens.
Yeah, isn't that like what they did in the Blade thing with the dog who's their face is
opened.
One of the bros are in it. And
one of Bros.
They've got
I think it was Luke Goss was in it. Yeah, it was Blade 2.
It's Luke or Matt Bros. Yeah, I don't know. Who cares? The Death Race one probably. Yeah, didn't they do that in one of them?
Yeah,
probably the Guillermo del Toro one, I would say, because there's that one, there's
Blade
the first
2.
one, and then which is the Guillermo one. So I'm guessing that was probably inspired by the thing somehow.
Potentially.
Face splitting dog.
I mean, ditto Stranger Things with the Demogorgons. Very similar effect.
Yeah, I wonder if that was inspired by a lot of other like 80s stuff. Stranger Things.
No.
All original ideas in that show.
Definitely was not mining nostalgia from its largely millennial audience. I can't get my words out today. I'm all tongue-tied. Speaking of, going back to that, I think it's primarily like tongues and teeth and whatever when its face opens up. Such a good scene because, like you just said, they get right to it. There's very little preamble. You know, you get the sense that something's not quite right, and then you're just left with this dog watching it kind of start to shake and shudder, and it's so impactful, I think. And I'm a big fan of like creature features. I'm a big fan of body horror. So it's no surprise that a lot of this film super, super works for me. But I mean, the sequences with the visual effect, not the visual effects, the practical effects, just wow. And even as a modern audience member, you can kind of start to put together how they did things. Like when the tentacles start to come out, it's like, well, yeah, obviously they've done that in reverse. Or
I mean, I'm scratching my head. I don't have a clue how they did any of it. And I
Okay.
work in the industry. I've got no fucking idea.
But you're not an effects guy, you're a numbers guy.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like, well, how much did that fucking KY jelly cost?
Yeah.
Can you have done it with 2.5 litres instead of 5 litres? I would say the thing that I like most about this is the effects. They are pretty mind-blowing. I think they hold up today just as well.
I think there's one that lets the film down.
Okay, well, you've seen it way more than I have, so you probably know this. You definitely know this film way better than I do.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sort of, you know, what have I seen it 3 times now? I think
Yeah.
it was twice with you, so it must be 3 times I've seen it.
Once as a literal child.
Yeah, so like I might as well have just seen it twice
Yeah.
in the last few years. But I do think the effects are some of the best I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
That the dog part, the head part.
I think something that's referenced a lot is the chest compressions.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking in my head. I couldn't figure out how to describe it because they got who was the guy? That guy, the guy with the face. Whoever was doing that. When his arms get eaten by the stomach alien.
So
teeth alien.
His name I can never remember. He was the doctor, the guy with the nose ring. And interestingly, if you know what to look for, you can sort of see that there's something a bit amiss in that, but it's shot so cleverly that nobody ever notices.
Yeah.
And basically when, obviously he goes to do the chest compressions and the chest cavity completely caves in and the rib cage sort of bites his arms off. And then it switches to a shot where you're kind of stomps facing the camera. That was actually a kind of double amputee wearing a mask of the actor's face.
Yeah, so weird, man.
But you don't notice because your attention is drawn to his stomps, his bloody arms, which are in the foreground. It's so cleverly done. Yeah. It's so simple, but I think it's not just Rob Bottin. I think he did phenomenal work in this, don't get me wrong. And Stan Winston, let's not forget him. But I think in the hands of somebody that isn't John Carpenter, it could have looked like shit.
Well, I think obviously the special effects budget was 10% of the entire thing, so they had 1.5 million to spend, and I couldn't tell you if that's a lot or not much. I suspect probably not much for a film that relies so heavily on effects like this.
It doesn't sound like a lot, and I know Rob Bottin was hospitalised at one point because he worked himself to the bone and got basically suffered from exhaustion.
Yeah, he's just like sleeping on set, and basically, I think I heard he was just 7 days a week basically until the thing was finished. He obviously would have had a whole team around him also, but so there are, you know, let's not forget the other people.
Oh, of course, yeah,
working under him and also doing a lot of the work. I believe he came up with a lot of the concept designs and sort of worked with Carpenter. I think he actually was trying to get a meeting with John Carpenter early because obviously he was young. He was 23, as we said, so maybe he was 22 when he was sort of trying to meet John Carpenter and stuff. Obviously, huge fan of Halloween and stuff. Heard he was working on this sort of remake of this thing and really wanted to get in there. So I think he did come up with a lot of these concept designs. So a lot of it, I would say, is probably his. Obviously directed by John Carpenter phenomenally. So you've got like a really good mixture of all of the creature design, the effects, how it looks, but also like the way that it's shot. I suspect the lighting and like you said about your focus is on the arms. It's that sort of trickery that it's like the trick of the mind or of the eye, where your attention is drawn somewhere else. It's that kind of classical filmmaking that you I don't want to sound like an old fart, but I'm gonna, because
it was better in the old days.
But now it's like, I will fix it in post. You know, like you do sometimes get people that kind of want to do it the old way, but I guess it's more expensive, or it must be a money thing, I suspect.
Well, it's definitely more time consuming, and time is money, I guess. So
yeah, but then obviously materials and stuff, whereas he's just paying a nerd on a computer, like you can pay them a pittance because they just want to be there on a film or whatever. I don't know. I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying that's probably how it is. But it's just a lot of those old school techniques were really flawlessly executed, I think, in this, and you don't see a lot of it anymore. But that's part of the reason why films like this hold up so well, and they continue to have a life, and people discover it at new stages every sort of decade or two. new people come to these sorts of things. Like, I can't imagine, like, I'm sure that there's someone out there that really likes the Thing remake. I think it's fine. Remake, prequel, sequel, whatever. But I can't imagine anyone's ever come to that and going to go, oh yeah, actually that's really good. Like, that's now my favourite movie. And like anything kind of sort of CGI based, it just sort of ages very quickly, doesn't it?
Agreed.
Like with practical stuff, it's sort of timeless. Even if it doesn't look great, it's a physical thing that's got real lighting on it. It's interacting with its environment.
It's got weight. It's got heft. It's not a green screen. It's not just talk to this tennis ball on a stick and pretend it's a creature.
You can't beat it. You just can't. And I suspect one day there'll be a CGI and computer generated effects that you just can't even tell was computer generated. I'm sure, but like, I think
I'm kind of two minds, because this is going to sound like I'm going off on a tangent, but stay with me for a second. There's this like obsession currently with like perfect teeth, the Hollywood smile, to the point where every single influencer or reality star in the UK fucks off to Turkey, comes back with a row of what look like pellets of chewing gum in their mouth.
They're called the Ruffalo, I think.
Oh, after Mickey 17. I see what you did there. To the point where they're now known as turkey teeth. It's such a phenomenon. But it's gotten to the point where it's so saturated and people are so sick of this so-called perfection that people are actually seeking out imperfection. They want actors and actresses that look like real human beings again. They don't want this, like, people always talk about what's known as iPhone face. Dakota Johnson is usually used as quite a prominent example of that. She was, I can't remember which film it was. She was in a period piece and she looked so wrong. She looked like somebody, I think the phrase was, she looked like somebody who knows what an iPhone is. She didn't look like she should have been there. And I think we're sort of hopefully returning to a point where people want authenticity again. They want imperfections. And my real hope is that maybe that permeates the industry a little bit. It might take a decade. It might take 2 decades. But I really want, I don't know, my desire and my hope is that people kind of don't necessarily want this computer generated perfection. They get disillusioned with AI and they want human creation with soul, because that's what's going to be missing. And this might seem like an odd comparison. I think the film came out the day we're recording this episode. It's the new Russo brothers movie called The Electric State.
Oh, is that a Russo brothers movie?
It is a Russo brothers movie, yeah. It's getting shat on.
Yeah, I was sort of interested in it, and then I saw the reviews and I think, no, I'm not going to bother.
I was not interested in it because I saw Chris Pratt and went, nope. Yeah. But it's getting ripped to shreds, and one of the talking points is that they didn't create the robots. It's seemingly all CGI.
Yeah.
And that's been a big complaint. So my hope is that maybe we'll go backwards a little bit in time.
I think it's a really good tool to just use to enhance things. Like, Fury Road is a good example.
Yeah, but
perfect stunts, but touched up with CGI.
That's exactly it. Yeah, it should be a tool. It shouldn't be a full-on replacement.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Unfortunately, it just comes down to money and what people will just watch.
But people aren't watching that. Like, people are getting so sick of this $300 million slop that we keep getting given.
But they are watching it though, aren't they? Like, people all over the world are talking about how shit this thing is, and people are tuning into it. Like, I don't know what the numbers are with the streaming platforms, Netflix and stuff, if they're still releasing them. But like, if people are talking about it and they're watching it, isn't that all that matters? Is that all they care about? Like, cynically speaking, I don't want to watch it.
That's so disappointing.
I know. I don't know, maybe perhaps in a cinema, like cinematically, audiences are maybe getting a bit more wise to it. I don't know, because it does feel like in the last couple of years, some of the blockbusters are starting to do less numbers.
Yeah, there's been so many bombs.
And then more original stuff like The Substance, maybe is a good example of that, where people are just sort of enjoying that sort of thing a bit more, sort of a bit more independent and
with practical effects.
With practical effects, yeah. I think there's I personally would prefer to see practical effects. Use CGIs at all, as we say, like it's there. It's been there for probably as long as we've been alive, almost. But the best projects sort of use it, and you don't really notice it. It's there to enhance, not like a Black Panther battle scene where they're just flying through the air and it's just cartoons.
Weightless.
Yeah, weightless. That's the thing that really stands out, isn't it? And
yeah.
And I get sick of the superhero stuff when they're just sort of jumping around and you can just see that they're not. It's nothing. It's just you might as well be watching
a
Bugs
cartoon
Bunny or something. Yeah. But I think as to take it back to the thing is one of the reasons that this holds up so well. Like it's never really going to age any more than it has done already. Like it might look a bit grainy. The sound might not be great. Like we don't really have a 4K setup or anything, so I don't really know what that looks like. But like it's never gonna age any more than it has.
And like I say, there's only really one effect that I can think of that really does let the side down, and that is the couch scene when they're doing the finger pricks, and then the guy's head sort of opens and chomps the other guy, and then he's sort of being lifted up into the air and flying. It's very clearly a dummy,
right?
But that's the only thing.
Okay,
and it's not necessarily. I don't know. Maybe it's unfair to even call it an effect. I guess they just had to use what they could, and again, it's to do with the fact that the dummy is clearly a third of the weight of a human man, so it just doesn't look right. But even then, I can admire a creative solution to that problem.
Yeah.
How would you categorize this movie? Because obviously
it's a horror movie.
Obviously it's a horror movie. But I mean, I think it straddles so many different subgenres.
Okay, give me some. What do you reckon?
Well, body horror we've already talked about. Creature feature we've already talked about.
Isn't that all horror though?
Yes, which is why I said subgenre.
Got ya. That's what that means. Okay. Yeah.
Alien invasion. Paranoid thriller. Like it encompasses quite a few things, I think.
Yeah.
Within that genre.
Comedy, like slapstick.
Oh yeah. Laugh a minute. Do you find this movie to be particularly tense? Because I feel like your answer is going to be no, and I think maybe that's why you like it less than I do.
I don't find it particularly tense. I couldn't tell you why I don't find it tense, because like on paper it's like, well, we don't really know who the thing is, and you don't ever really get given any answers, do you, about like who became the thing or like when people became the thing. Case in point, Wilford Brimley's character, because it seems like he's not the thing, and then at one point he is the thing. When did that happen? So to answer your question, I don't find it particularly tense, but I feel like I should, because it is that kind of that paranoia, and it's meant to be that way, isn't it? You're meant to feel the tension.
I find it unbearably tense,
even though you know exactly how it's going to play out.
Yeah, when I'm watching this in a proper environment, like lights off, full focus is at the TV, I am sat down, invested in what's going on the screen, I can't help but get sucked into it. Yeah, I find it unbearably tense, which I think is probably, for me, like its biggest selling point, that it retains the power to do that. Because that's the feeling that I chase. That's one of the reasons that I love horror as a genre so much. I'm forever. I mean, how many times have you heard me say, "Oh my God, this new movie's just dropped on Shudder," and people are calling it the scariest film of the last 5 years? Because I'm chasing that feeling, and obviously we watch it, and I'm disappointed every time.
Yeah, it's never the scariest movie you've ever seen.
It's never even remotely scary, because I've seen so much. I'm just immune to it now. But I'll never stop chasing that feeling.
Yeah.
And films like this kind of deliver it for me. I wouldn't call it scary, but it's so tense.
But the tension is like it makes you feel something, I guess.
Yeah, it makes me feel anxious. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. It gives me a human emotion.
And what is it about this movie that gives you the anxiety? Because you know how it's going to play out. So is it just like how the information is presented to you? Is it because you're not, because you must know this film like the back of your hand. Like how many times have you seen this now?
Oh, I couldn't tell you.
A lot, though.
A lot, yeah.
It's more than me.
Yes, more than 3 times.
But So I'm trying to wrap my head around what would be tense about it. Basically, I guess. Because to me, the tension is in the sort of the unknown of how things are going to play out, but you know how it's going to play out. But then I suppose you have all of the unanswered questions, but then they're still not answered. So I guess by the end of the movie, I'm just like, oh, well, we don't fucking know. Forget about it. They're not going to tell me, are they? We can talk about it.
So for me, the tension is derived from the human drama and the performances. I think the performances are all so solid and the interactions are all... I think the script is incredibly clever. I think it's pitch perfect.
Did Carpenter write this? I'm pretty sure he did.
But it's just... I don't know. I think the script is perfect.
Yeah.
And you know me. You know that's one of the things that I tend to pick apart. Like if a film looks good and it's exciting but has a shit script, I'm out. I'm checked out mentally. Yeah. But I think this is just brilliantly done. And just the scenes where... I don't know. I guess it's empathy talking, like trying to put myself in a position where I don't know if everybody that I'm surrounded with, not just surrounded by, but trapped with, any one of them could be a parasitic alien come to take over the planet. That's terrifying. That's such a scary notion.
But that's the case in all situations, though, isn't it? Like anyone could be a parasitic alien. Like if you go into a meeting, you never know. Like. The chances of someone being a parasitic alien are not 0%.
They're never 0, so but it's unlikely.
There's always a chance.
But in this case, it's almost 100% that at least one person is probably going to be an alien.
Yeah.
And I find that paranoia so well done. So well done. What do you think this movie is supposed to be about? Like, we know almost all horror... Well, no, all horror is kind of political. All good horror exists to hold a mirror up to society and to say something about the times it was made in.
Do you think vampires is political?
Well, no, I said all good horror.
That's true, you did. That's another one of those situations where it's bad, but I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think most horror films are political, if not all.
All right.
Whether they're intended to be or not, I think they say something about the time they were made in and the person that made them.
I suppose that is kind of the mark of horror, isn't it? That's kind of the intention, or the original intention maybe, is to say something that is not being said. Maybe in kind of like stand-up comedy in that way, like people are sort of outside looking in and criticising a thing, or getting something off their chest, or expressing something in a way that works for them.
But again, good comedy. Because if you're Michael McIntyre, you're just probably talking about Nando's or something.
Yeah. Isn't it weird? You have to queue in Nando's. Fuck off. Fuck off and
you
die.
know he orders mild as well.
Yeah. But what do I think it's about? I'm really bad at this sort of question because it means I have to use my brain, and I'm not very good at that. I think I have heard John Carpenter, in his own words, say that it came out in the early 80s. There was the whole AIDS thing where it was, they were not really sure what it was or where it came from or how it was transmitted. And there was a lot of paranoia about how it was transmitted. There was a lot of false information going around. So I've heard him speak on that. So I can only tell you that that's what I've heard. I haven't really got my own opinion on it because I just didn't really think about it, or nothing occurred to me while I was watching it. But hearing him say that, I can see where he's coming from.
It's funny because...
what's the right answer?
Well, there's never a right or wrong answer, is there, in what you think a film is about?
Yeah, but I'm saying that I don't really know. So
no, but I think that's a really solid answer.
But that's John Carpenter's answer.
John Carpenter can't always be trusted. He said wildly... Precisely. No, he said wildly contradictory things about the ending and the fate of Childs and MacReady.
Oh, was he?
Yes, which we'll get to.
All right.
So I think
what do you think it's about?
I think he likes to mess with people.
Yeah, without question. Yeah, for sure. What does it mean? What's it for you though? Then this.
I think you're probably right, and that's what makes the most sense to me. For a while, I was like, well, it could just be about like the kind of post-Cold War paranoia thing, like who amongst us could be a spy.
Yeah. Well, there was, I suppose, for some reason I'm thinking about Oppenheimer, because like obviously we saw that movie that was too long and very boring. But there's that whole stuff about him being a communist, which I had no idea about. So I guess that was a bit of a thing back then, like who's a secret communist.
Yeah.
And I know we sort of touched on it earlier with the novella. I think that was kind of the subtext of that. So I guess that sort of links into the spy thing in a way.
But I like your answer better, and I think it plays out better. It's the theory that I had in mind when I watched it this time.
Yeah.
And it's the one that makes the most sense to me, even down to really kind of throwaway actions. Like there's a point at which I think it's Windows who takes a needle that's been used by somebody else and he wipes it, like he's sort of vaguely disgusted that he might be sharing germs with somebody. So I think if you watch it with that in mind, that makes 100% sense.
Well, you've obviously got the whole blood test thing in there as well.
Yeah.
Like it's
they call it an infectious disease, effectively.
Yeah. And you're not sure, like, at the time as well, obviously we know way more about HIV and AIDS these days. And but back then, like, no one really knew what it was, how it was transmitted. There was all of this nonsense, like you can catch it from sitting on a toilet seat or whatever. Like, and it was obviously complete bollocks. But people didn't really know then. It took a long time for that stuff to go away as well. Like, not until probably the 2000s and perhaps even slightly later. Where
I think some people are still pretty ignorant about it, to be honest.
100%. But like back then, I would say it was the commonplace. Like you go to a film like Philadelphia, maybe, which is, you know, when was that? 92, where there was obviously the prejudice that's showed in that movie about that thing. So yeah, I don't know, like 82, early 80s, it was definitely a time where a lot of people were losing their lives to that disease. And a lot of people were just scared and afraid. And it's quite interesting. I haven't actually looked up any, like, you know, you sometimes get these really old, like, public health messages and you watch it and you go, is this fucking satire? Like, what is it? And I bet there's some crazy shit about that, actually.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there, because that's something this film does so well in sort of like displaying the whole, it could be any of us, because there's nothing in somebody's outward appearance that would necessarily tip you off. And that's very much the same here, unless you see them mid-assimilation, which we don't really. I think that's one of the things I love about this film, is that you don't really, I mean, I'm guessing some of the decisions were budgetary constraints, but I think we only really see like one assimilation of a human. And I think that's expertly done because it keeps the audience on their toes. It keeps us guessing.
Yeah. It probably is a bit of a budget thing, but also like...
But it's a smart choice.
But it's, I suppose, it is a smart choice in that it probably saved the money, but also it does fit in with the whole, we just don't know who is a thing and who is not other thing. So yeah, it does fit in with that whole thing. And
stuff like, you were talking about Wilford Brimley earlier. And
did he have a moustache in this?
I don't think he did. I think that's why he looked weird. Yeah. He was like a young, fresh-faced Wilford Brimley at 48.
Yeah, well, 47 when he was making it, I guess.
5 years older than me.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
But I love some of that stuff as well. You've already talked about it a little bit, but like, we don't know if he's an alien, if he's been infected. And then you sort of see him darting about outside, and he's kind of taking the helicopter apart, and he's...
Yeah.
You know, removing engines from things and stuff, and you're just like, oh god, he's an alien, he's trying to sabotage their getaway. But then you find out that he's kind of building his own thing to try to get away. But you're left kind of up in the air, because it's like, oh, is it because he's done the maths about worldwide assimilation and he's just trying to sabotage them so none of them can escape?
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking, like, because he has that. By the way, did they have AI in 1982?
That was the Chat GPT prototype, I believe.
Yeah. Because he was like, how long will it take for the entire world to be infected? Now, like, about 4 minutes, I guess. And he was like, fuck, all right, well. So, yeah, it's clever because they're not sure if he's the thing. So, like, Brimley, fuck off. We're going to lock you in the shed in case you're the thing.
Did they threaten him with morphine? I feel like they said they were going to inject him with morphine at some point. In which case, like, maybe I'm an alien.
Yeah.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
That's a threat, is it? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so they lock him up, and you're like, he's obviously the thing at the end because he's building a spaceship, right?
Yes. Yeah.
A rudimentary spaceship from bits of helicopter and fucking flymos or whatever from the shed. But it's not clear when he became the thing, and what are his motives for destroying a place. That's interesting to think about, because it's like, is he the thing and he's taking it apart so he can make a spaceship, or is he not the thing and he just doesn't want the whole world to be infected?
Mm-hmm.
So he's kind of doing this altruistic thing, like, look, we're all going to die, but the best thing we can do is just make sure that the thing doesn't get out into the world.
That's why I think it's so smartly done, though, because we are left guessing for the majority of the runtime.
I suppose it's quite subtle. Like, it's not asking you to think about that, but it's just not. It's like the sort of thing that you think about afterwards. I'm not thinking at the time, oh, is he the thing or whatever. I'm just seeing him smash up stuff and wondering where his moustache is and if he's going to be in the Cocoon 3. But it's like I'm not thinking about that until afterwards, really. And I guess that's the smart way to do it. And that's why people sort of continue to have the conversation about it now. Because even now, like, you don't really know. And I think Carpenter does have a definitive answer to specifically the ending, right? At least.
No.
Oh, really? Okay.
He's said different things.
Okay.
He's not full on done like a David Lynch and just gone, no, it's about nothing.
Yeah.
Or you tell me.
Because, well, I suppose if we're going into the area about who's the thing and who's not the thing, then the most obvious part of it to discuss would be the very ending, when you've got the two guys at the end and who is the thing and who's not the thing.
Yeah.
MacReady and Childs.
Yes.
Yeah. And I guess you can look at it many ways. What was one theory I heard about someone having an earring and not having an earring?
Well, they talked about that, didn't they? Like the aliens can only replicate organic matter effectively. So they think the fact that Childs has his earring in at the end suggests he is human.
I couldn't remember what way round it was, whether he had it or he didn't have it at the end, but he has it. So
yes,
suggestion would be that maybe the alien just put the earring in after, right?
Maybe. I'm not saying. I think this is about as close to perfection as a movie can get, but I'm not saying it's 100% perfect, because there are things I have issues with. One thing which I guess could be written off as character stupidity is...
Who's the stupid one?
Well...
Who's Proctor?
So the scene when the blood scene, the Petri dish scene,
yeah,
they're all using the same knife to cut themselves, but they've been told that this is an infectious disease.
Oh, fuck,
so
right.
So if they're all using the same knife and the first one who does it is an alien, everybody's fucked.
I think you've just cracked it. I think they're all the thing.
Maybe. But Carpenter did come out and say at one point that, it's clear that Childs is the thing because he's not breathing. You can see MacReady's breath and you can't see Childs' breath.
Yeah.
But apparently that's bullshit. At one point you do see his breath.
Right.
So
okay.
He's just messing with people.
Yeah. He seems like the type.
He does. He absolutely does. Crotchety motherfucker. But going back to the video game that you mentioned earlier, so the video game starts entirely as the film ends. Childs froze to death. MacReady is rescued.
Why didn't he freeze to death? Because he's full of whiskey?
Yeah, and the beard, I guess, kept him warm. I don't know. It was quite a beard.
He had that Parker.
Apparently the hair and the beard took him a full year to grow for this role. Yeah.
Bloody hell. But it was his last minute casting though. So was he just growing a beard and just in case I'm
maybe
in the thing? Or
maybe. They wanted Nick Nolte. He was first choice.
I could see that actually.
Yeah. Because I think they wanted like a sort of a bigger guy.
Yeah.
Like Kurt Russell's not a small guy, but he's not like some hulking behemoth.
He's no Lou Ferrigno, is he?
No, I can't imagine this with Lou Ferrigno in the lead role.
I heard he was first choice. The
Did you?
First choice, yeah.
Green or not green?
Green.
Green. Okay.
Well, initially,
he's the thing.
Initially, he wasn't green, and then someone made him angry. And he was like, "Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry."
Oh, that very niche Stuart Lee reference there.
Yeah.
About 3 people got that.
What do you think Who do you think is the thing at the end of the movie out of Charles and Mac?
Well, if you remove the video game, which is difficult because Carpenter's said it's canon.
But I'm saying, what do you like this movie on its own?
On its
your own
own.
thoughts. You're watching this, lights off. What do you think at the end of the movie?
I mean, it's taken as its own beast. It's a very bleak, nihilistic ending, which kind of makes me wonder if that was the reason for some of the pushback when it was released. Maybe people just didn't want nihilism.
Well, I did hear that there was an original ending.
There were a few.
Yeah, so
there were a few.
I think there was one when they were rescued,
Mm-hmm.
and then one where one of them was a thing and the other one wasn't, maybe, and they sort of came to this ambiguous ending, which I guess sort of works well, and is one of the reasons we're sort of talking about it now.
I really like it.
But if you had to make a choice, either of those two are the thing, or is one of them are the thing, or neither of them are the thing?
Okay, if I get to choose, I think MacReady is the thing, because I think that's the more interesting ending, that our hero, as it were, is the thing.
Yeah.
And also he doesn't have any earrings, so it's more difficult to write Charles off as the thing.
Yeah, I would say that's probably. I mean, he's not really a hero, is he? Like he's
kind of an anti-hero. He's our de facto leader.
He's the leader. Yeah, he sort of emerges as the leader of the group, but not because of some like heroic characteristics. It's because he just wants to survive. He wants to live, and he's kind of willing to do anything to do that. Like he's not very nice, is he? He kills Adrian Barbeau with that whiskey, and then he kill an actual like a man? Isn't it because that when they test the blood of someone, didn't they say, well, doesn't that make you a murderer now? So did he kill a human? Is that what the implication was there? So there's that he has murdered people.
So there was an element to MacReady's character that didn't make it into the film. I know Carpenter and Russell talked about MacReady having been at war, basically. He was a veteran.
Yeah, I heard this was part of his backstory, yeah.
Which they kind of shit-canned in the end. Or it certainly wasn't mentioned in the film, but would explain why he doesn't necessarily have as horrified a reaction as the others do to the violence and the gore, and why he sort of very reluctantly adopts the role of leader. Because it doesn't seem like it's a role he necessarily wants, but like you've said, he just wants to live. I
think he's just taking over. Like, I don't think he wants to be the leader. He's just like, I don't trust any of you.
Yeah.
I can only trust myself. I know I'm not the thing.
I certainly can't trust Wilford Brimley, so we're going to lock him in a room.
Yeah.
Yeah. He can't even trust his computer.
Yeah. All he can trust is that sweet J&B whiskey.
Yeah.
Which we've drunk. We had a bottle of that, didn't we? A while ago. Didn't last very long. So you think the interesting ending would be MacReady is the thing?
Yeah, because it's already been speculated that Childs is. So to me, the more interesting ending is that MacReady's been taken over.
And at what point was he taken over?
We don't know. This is not a film that delivers every answer.
But was he always the thing?
No. Well, it's obviously post blood test, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Maybe it was just before he caused the explosion underground.
Right. Did he? Oh yeah, I forgot they had one of those Acme,
like a TNT plunger.
Yeah. plunger bombs. Yeah. Which are they real?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I thought it was only Wile E. Coyote that had access to those.
No, it's also R.J. MacReady.
Yeah.
Okay. Apparently the explosion was much bigger than anybody had anticipated, so Kurt Russell's reaction is real. He wasn't expecting it.
Oh no. Apparently as well, like there was a part in the movie where I can't remember who it was. It was someone on the crew or in the cast, but they had to, I think it had something to do with the matte paintings. It's beautiful matte paintings in this, by the way, which you've not even spoken about.
Not the first time we'll be talking about matte paintings this season.
Oh really?
Really?
Okay. But like a lost art form that just you cannot beat.
Such a creative workaround.
Yeah. I think the bit with the spaceship is the best example I can think of. Like just the scope that you can achieve with that in the 80s, like back then. and it still looks good now. Like even then you're like, wow, that looks great. But I think it was something to do with the matte paintings and then wanting to achieve a certain lighting, so they were waiting around for like a magic hour situation or whatever.
Right.
And the helicopter pilot was like, okay, well, how long are we going to wait? And they ended up waiting ages, and they went, well, okay, we're going to go now. And they flew off in a helicopter, and as they were in the air, they were like, oh, I don't know if we've got enough fuel to get home. And it was really worrying, apparently. Like they didn't even know if they were going to make it all the way back, and they said we might have to land and stay in a helicopter, in which case do they freeze to death? Like, who knows? So it was a bit shaky. Like it was a bit like 50-50 whether or not they were going to make it. It's crazy to think about, like on a Hollywood production, because they did shot some of this. Do you know where this was shot? I can't think of the.
I think it was British Columbia.
That's it. Yeah, it was British Columbia.
Yeah,
they shot a lot of that's where they had the set, like the cabins and stuff set up, and
so the US camp and the Norwegian camp were the same set.
Right.
They just filmed the Norwegian stuff after the US set had been destroyed, so they didn't have to build two.
Right. Yeah. Well, they shot it in 2011 as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. They also shot a load of stuff in a studio in LA, didn't they? Did you hear about this?
I heard that they had to lower the temperature.
Yeah.
On an internal set, yeah, and it was like really fucking warm outside.
Apparently, it was like one of the hottest summers ever. They had a super cooled like air conditioned set, and they increased the humidity in there, because that's how you can see your breath. That's how that works somehow.
Right.
I don't fucking know. That's what they said. So it was really cold. So they're all in their parkas and like thick wintry type gear inside, and then they'd go out to lunch and it was just absolutely roasting. But they got so sick of changing from one situation to the next that they would brave the walk to the canteen, and everyone was giving them weird looks like, why are you fucking dressed in a parka, man? It's like everyone's melting here. But yeah, what a weird thing. Like getting ill all the time, like that constant change, like severe change in temperature. Like that's a horrible situation to work in.
Yeah, it doesn't sound pleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder how much of it was on set versus location.
Well, I would say because there is the commentary with John Carpenter and Kurt Russell. I did watch some of it on YouTube. Like there's a version of it on YouTube where they don't show you the film. They sort of have stills of the film throughout. Okay. Like every minute or so they change to a still that's around about that sort of area. So I think I watched about 40 or 45 minutes of that at 1.5 speed the other night. And that's where I heard a lot of this stuff, I think. But
you told everybody you listened to the whole thing.
Yeah, I rated it on Letterboxd. Yeah. The external stuff was all British Columbia, but a lot of the internal stuff was set. So like they've got, did they have a pool table? Or am I thinking of the Norwegian version? I was going to say, am I thinking of the 2011 version?
Do you know what? Because we watched them in such quick succession. I don't think they had a pool table.
Someone had a pool table, and I can't remember who it was. But the part where Jed the dog sort of is walking under the table, and, like all of that stuff was in the studio or in a lot in Los Angeles. But it's like you never know. Like I suppose that's the magic. Of kind of filmmaking, really.
Movie magic.
And I had no idea that it was the relative humidity that made breath visible rather than the actual temperature.
I didn't realise this was going to be a science lesson as well.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm walking away from this much smarter than I was at the start.
I think this is the most intellectual this season is going to get. Like, there's some
without
dumb
a doubt
fucking movies coming up. I don't know if I'm glad that we've got the thing, like, because it is a weird movie, isn't it? Like it's kind of, is it a popcorn kind of entertaining movie? I would say on one level it is because of the creature effects and
but I think it's smarter than that.
Entertainment value, but yeah, it is absolutely smarter than that. Like
it's got more substance than the average popcorn movie.
Yeah, it has definitely. And I don't know if I'm glad that we've got the more interesting subtext conversation out of the way now, and we can go into dumb fuckery now from now on. Or if we'd have built up to this, why did we start with The Thing?
I can't remember,
because
I think you just asked me what we should start with, and I said The Thing.
Yeah,
without
maybe.
thinking.
I suppose that might become more apparent as we get further along the season, and sort of the whole season is out. and we can sort of see the journey, chart the journey from the thing to whatever we end up on.
I think next week is going to be quite divorced from this week.
Yeah, I suppose so. It's my choice next week, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And you've gone with...
It's a film I've been dying to. I haven't seen this for I was going to say ages, but it's probably like 5 years. I suppose that's quite a long time. Just recently got a nice, is it 88 films or 101? I can't remember. But
I want to say 101.
It's a nice brand new 101 release, and I'm dying to watch it. It's Masters.
You're doing the Donald Trump hand gesture, and it's freaking me out.
What?
You were just going like that.
Does he do that?
Yeah.
Doesn't he go like that though?
Yeah, he does that. He does the invisible accordion a lot as well.
Does he? Well, I wasn't doing that. I wasn't doing the YMCA shuffle thing either. Why would you say that to me? Oh, now I can't think of it. We're doing Masters of the Universe.
Yes.
The 1987 fucking masterpiece that was a flop, and it's a Canon Films.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be like a lot to talk about.
Mm.
And I'm hoping that there's quite a lot of good extras on this fancy new version that I probably paid too much money for. But it's beautiful, and I've never owned it on Blu-ray, so I'm dead excited to watch it. Yeah, my choice next week, film 2 out of 10, Masters of the Universe.
Yes, I'm so happy that I finally got to talk about The Thing.
Finally, yeah.
Finally.
It blows my mind that you've never covered this before.
If you enjoyed our chat about The Thing, you should definitely go and listen to our podcast pals show called Just the Thing.
Yeah.
Where they work that into every single episode.
I was going to make a joke in the episode. Wouldn't it be great if someone started a podcast where they have to get The Thing into whatever movie they're talking about?
Yeah, someone should do that.
Someone should do that.
That's such a genius idea. So go and check that out. We'll put a link in the show notes.
Yep.
And also, if you've made it this far, please consider supporting us on Patreon, because it's only the Patreons that kind of fund this. We've never had a sponsorship. We don't do adverts at the moment. Hopefully never will.
Well,
we can't promise. If somebody offers us some sweet ad money, I'm not going to say no.
I'm not beyond selling out. If we can still do what we want to do, put a fucking ad in there and you can skip it. Like,
depends what it's for. I'm not shilling better help to the unsuspecting public. But anyway.
Yeah, you have a conscience. That's the thing. Like, my brain's like, I hear all these adverts when I'm listening to podcasts, and I'm just like, just skip it. Just skip it 10 seconds until you get to the thing, and then it's fine.
But yeah. You can also join as a free member and check out all the films, all 10 films that we're covering this season, which I think this season is just going to be a doozy.
Yeah, it's a fun one. It's definitely a fun one. I'm
looking forward to next week.
Yeah, me too. Gwildor.